Names. The thing misspelled on the side of your Starbucks cup. I believe the first thing that you need when you're creating a new character is their name. After all, that's the first box in the characterization sheet. Character names might at first seem like a simple thing to decide on, and you perhaps have never given them much thought. However, if you want to separate yourself from the crowd and join the big names out there, it will help to give some more thought to how you name your characters. Good character names can improve the cultural and temporal setting of your story. They can help with characterization, and they can make your characters more memorable, which is going to make your writing better overall. There are a lot of reasons to take naming your characters seriously, so to help you do that, I've compiled 3 tips for naming your characters. Tip number 1, character names should be culturally and geographically relevant. Dirk Steele is a kick-ass name for a character, but if your story takes place in ancient Rome, the name Dirk Steele is going to stand out like a classically sore thumb. Your character names need to reflect the location, time, and culture that your story is set in. Of course, if your story takes place in a sci-fi or fantasy setting, then this rule doesn't apply. If your character name doesn't fit the era that you're writing in, then they're going to become this weird anachronism that your readers are sure to pick up on. It's going to have a negative effect on their view of the character and an overall negative effect on their view of your story. There's lots of things you can do to research this. You can look at old census records or different documents online. You can look at the origin of certain names, where they came from, what country and time periods they originated in, that sort of thing. A little bit of research here goes a long way to make sure that the names you're giving your characters make sense in the setting of your story. Tip number 2, character names should be unique enough from one another as to not cause confusion. You know when you pick your kids up from daycare and there's like 11 kids in the class named Ethan and another 12 named Oliver and like 15 named Noah? This is no doubt confusing, and it makes it difficult to tell people apart. You do not want your readers to have the same confusion. To avoid this in your story, you want to make sure that you give each of your characters a unique name. Names that aren't too similar to each other, and definitely not the same name across multiple characters. Your character list should not sound like Edward, Eddie, Edwin, Eduardo, and Edamame. That's going to be a problem. A good rule of thumb here is try to make sure that each character name starts with a different letter, that character names have different numbers of syllables, that they don't have similar sounds within them. Another thing that can cause confusion and annoyance on the part of the reader is having a character name that's way too long. You see this a lot with fantasy stories where they'll have this long made-up character name that no one can hope to pronounce, and it becomes tiring to read it over and over again. It's not just the reader that this tires out. For you, the author, you're going to be writing your character's name a whole bunch of times throughout your story, so having a really long, unwieldy name that your autocorrect always changes on you is not a fun way to go about things. If you really want to give your character an absurdly long name, see about giving them some sort of nickname or shortened version of their name so that you're not constantly repeating this gargantuanly long name throughout your entire story. Because after all, sometimes your character having a long name has a purpose. Tip number 3, you should use your character names for characterization whenever possible. To one degree or another, the name that you have affects your personality and how other people in the world perceive you. There are various stereotypes and assumptions around certain names. Some names lend themselves a degree of regality. Other names might be the subject of ridicule. Talking to all the Richards out there. I couldn't find any good sources on whether this is actually something that happens. I found lots of articles that say, hey, your name affects your personality and your life and all this stuff, but I couldn't actually find any decent evidence that this is actually a thing. I think that there are assumptions that people make depending on what name you have, and certain names might be associated with famous people, and that's going to make people think different things about you. But I don't know if there's any actual science behind this idea. In any event, you should try to leverage this phenomenon, whether it exists in the real world or not, in naming your characters. I've mentioned before that you should take advantage of every single opportunity you have for characterization, and that goes all the way up to the name you give your character. There are many different things that you can imply about a character by the name that you give them. If they have a fancier sounding name, they're going to seem more upper class. If they have a funny, kind of ridiculous name, they're gonna seem more comedic. If they have a feminine name, they're gonna seem that way. If they have a masculine name, they're gonna seem another way. All of this can be used to give subtle clues about that character to the reader, which can help with characterization and get your readers closer to understanding your characters. This gets a little bit tricky to tease out because the reader's reaction to a given name are likely going to vary by reader, so this is something that you'll have to look at with your beta readers. This is also something that's impacted by personal experience, like if you have a bad experience with some guy named Trent who made fun of you in 4th grade, although Trent is a kick-ass character name. These assumptions, as I've mentioned, may or may not be true, like a lot of stereotypes and assumptions out there, they probably aren't, but that doesn't mean you can't leverage them for your purposes as a writer to get across specific characterization details that you want to pass along to the reader. Of course, you can always just skip the character's name entirely. Characters don't necessarily need a name, and you can get a lot of mileage and create a sense of mystery around a character if their name is unknown. If they're only ever referred to and the other characters in your story only ever know them as the scary guy with the axe, that can create a very specific effect. The example that leaps to my mind is an internationally known criminal that they have like a few blurry pictures of. Maybe they once found a partial fingerprint from his right index finger in Switzerland or something. That would be a cool book. Just like this was a cool video. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.